It was the kind of night that only existed in the movies. Warm city lights reflecting on wet asphalt after a gentle evening rain. Luxury cars purring to a stop in front of the Grand Regent Plaza Hotel. The red carpet rolled out under crystal chandeliers, and the air was heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Socialites in glittering gowns laughed with politicians and CEOs. But then, the atmosphere shifted. Heads turned, conversations paused. Even the photographers, already spoiled by beauty that night, froze at the sight stepping out of the sleek black limousine. Binta. Tall, elegant, and devastatingly beautiful, she moved like a queen who had just conquered a kingdom. Her skin caught the golden light like silk, her smile was polished perfection, and the gown she wore, a shimmering silver masterpiece, seemed to have been sewn directly onto her flawless figure. Every jewel on her neck and wrist looked like it belonged in a vault, not on a person. She walked past the cameras with the easy grace of someone who had lived in the spotlight all her life. Every click of her high heels echoed like a drumbeat, and yet behind the admiration in the crowd's eyes, there was a subtle undertone of envy and curiosity. Binta, the name whispered from mouth to mouth. Some said she was the most beautiful woman in the city. Others said she was the only daughter of billionaire hotel magnate Richard Dalton. And some claimed there was more to her than anyone dared to say out loud. Tonight, Binta was here for the annual Luxury Foundation Gala, a charity event that raised millions for children's education. She was the star of the night, the woman everyone wanted to stand beside, the one whose photograph alone could make a magazine sell out in hours. But as the cameras flashed and her diamond earrings swayed under the soft light, no one knew that within a few hours Binta would leave this glowing palace of perfection and return to a world that looked nothing like this. A world no camera had ever seen. Across the room, leaning casually against the marble pillar near the champagne bar, Adrian Cole watched her like a predator studying its prize. Adrian was not a billionaire. He wasn't even close. In fact, he was barely holding on. His designer suit was rented, his watch a clever replica, and his charm, well, that was the only thing that truly belonged to him. He was the kind of man who knew exactly how to use his words, his smile, and his eyes to get what he wanted. And tonight, what he wanted was Binta Dalton. He had heard the stories. Her father's empire stretched from luxury hotels to private islands. Her social media showed private jets, champagne on yachts, and breathtaking views from penthouse suites. If a man could win her heart, he could step into a life most people could only dream about. Adrian took a slow sip of champagne, scanning her every movement. She was magnetic. The way she laughed softly at the mayor's joke. The way she touched the arm of the charity host as if she'd known them forever. But there was something else. Something he couldn't quite name. When their eyes met across the room, Binta didn't smile. She didn't even flinch. She simply held his gaze for 3 long seconds, as though she was reading him. And then, just as smoothly, she looked away. It wasn't rejection. It was intrigue. Adrian's plan was simple. Get an introduction, make her laugh, become a regular face in her world. From there, the rest would be easy. At least, that's what he thought. 2 weeks later, Adrian found himself standing outside Binta's penthouse apartment. He imagined her home would be the epitome of elegance. Binta opened the door in casual silk loungewear. Her hair was tied loosely, her face still radiant even without makeup. "Come in," she said with a relaxed smile, stepping aside. Adrian walked in, expecting marble floors, designer art, and the faint scent of fresh flowers. Instead, his breath caught in his throat. The apartment was chaos. The white leather sofa was barely visible under piles of clothes, some crumpled designer dresses, others faded t-shirts. Half-eaten takeout containers sat on the glass coffee table beside empty wine bottles. The once pristine cream carpet had stains that looked like they'd been there for months. In the corner, he spotted something that made his stomach tighten. A heap of women's underwear, bras tangled with panties, and among them a few sanitary pads, crumpled, stained with something dark red. They looked carelessly tossed aside, as if they were nothing more than candy wrappers. The air was thick with the smell of stale food mixed with an overpowering perfume, as though she'd sprayed it to cover the odor. Binta walked past him without a hint of embarrassment, plopped down on the sofa, on top of a designer handbag, and began eating noodles straight from the pot, scrolling through her phone. "Sit," she said casually, as if this was completely normal. Adrian hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn around and leave. But then he remembered who she was. Binta Dalton, billionaire's daughter, his ticket into the life he'd always wanted. So he smiled, sat down, and told himself, "I can live with this. Just for the money." What he didn't know was that this was only the first layer of Binta's secret life. Adrian sat there for the first 10 minutes, trying not to let his eyes wander. Every instinct screamed at him to focus on her beauty, not the mess. But it was impossible to ignore. The once white curtains were dulled to a smoky beige, the walls bore faint fingerprints, and somewhere in the distance, a faint dripping sound came from the kitchen sink. Yet when Binta looked up at him, her eyes shone like nothing else in the world mattered. "You don't drink wine?" she asked, already reaching for a bottle. She poured him a glass without waiting for an answer. They talked about the gala, about mutual acquaintances, about nothing in particular, and Adrian found himself oddly charmed by how unfiltered she was. She didn't try to impress him with delicate manners. She laughed loudly, interrupted herself mid-story to check her phone, and even pulled her legs up onto the couch as they spoke, revealing mismatched socks. When she suggested dinner that Friday at an upscale restaurant, Adrian's heart skipped. He thought, "This is it, my chance to cement my place in her world." Friday night came, and she arrived, transformed. Every trace of the messy, unkempt woman from the apartment was gone. Her gown shimmered under the soft light of the restaurant lobby. Her hair flowed in perfect waves, and her perfume was so intoxicating, people turned to watch as she passed. Over oysters and champagne, she spoke about traveling to Monaco for a yacht party and casually mentioned private dinners with foreign dignitaries. Adrian listened, enthralled. He couldn't reconcile the woman before him with the chaos he'd seen in her home. He told himself it didn't matter. Public perfection was all that counted. What he didn't know was that this double life was not an accident. It was a choice. Adrian quickly learned that Binta's public life was a carefully choreographed performance. Every week, she attended charity balls, art exhibitions, and luxury brand launches. Every appearance was meticulously documented on her Instagram, the dress, the setting, the people she was seen with. When they went out, she was the center of attention. Journalists greeted her by name, photographers angled for better shots, and strangers whispered as she passed. She always seemed to say exactly the right thing, in exactly the right tone, with exactly the right smile. But every time Adrian followed her back home, reality slapped him in the face. The moment the door closed, the glamour dissolved. Shoes were kicked off carelessly, expensive handbags dropped on the floor, makeup wiped away with tissue and tossed onto the coffee table. Half-empty glasses from last week still sat in corners, plates with crusted leftovers balanced on armrests. It was like watching Cinderella's transformation in reverse. Except this Cinderella didn't care if the ball ended. One evening, he arrived to find her curled up on the couch in an oversized hoodie, scrolling through her phone, surrounded by the remains of what looked like 3 different takeout meals. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and beside her on the floor was a small pile of women's underwear mixed with a silk evening gown from the night before. Adrian tried to hint, Maybe we could clean up a little? But she just laughed. Why? No one comes here except me. And you now. And I don't mind the mess. He forced a smile, but deep down something in him stirred uneasily. It happened at the ambassador's charity brunch. The venue was a lush garden terrace overlooking the city skyline, with fountains trickling into marble basins and waiters gliding between tables in white gloves. Binta was perfection itself. A pastel dress, pearls at her neck, a delicate fascinator perched in her hair. She floated between tables, making introductions, laughing at jokes, dropping thoughtful comments that made her seem both brilliant and approachable. Then it happened. As she leaned over to greet a socialite, a sharp gust of wind blew, and the faintest but unmistakable scent drifted toward Adrian. Not the soft floral perfume she always wore, but something stale, unpleasant, out of place in such a pristine setting. The socialite's smile faltered. It was so quick most people wouldn't notice, but Adrian did. And suddenly he realized Binta's secret wasn't just in her home. Sometimes it followed her. That evening, Adrian couldn't shake the thought. Why would someone with every resource in the world live like this? It wasn't laziness. She was meticulous in her public image. It wasn't poverty. She had money beyond imagination. Something didn't add up. He decided quietly that he would find out. But as he was about to learn, some truths are far more uncomfortable than the mess that hides them. Adrian lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment, the image of Binta at the brunch replaying over and over in his mind. He couldn't shake the way the socialite's eyes flickered with discomfort, the subtle way she angled her body away, the tiny pause in her laugh before she resumed as if nothing had happened. The scent, it wasn't just body odor. It was something deeper, something stale, like a faint trace of rot lingering in the air long after the source was gone. Adrian turned on his side, scrolling through Binta's social media profile for the 100th time. Perfect. Every photo perfect. Every angle perfect. But now, behind every image, he could see what the public could not. The stained carpet, the half-eaten food, the piles of laundry, the careless way she moved through her home as if hygiene was a foreign language. He wanted answers, but asking directly was risky. Binta didn't take kindly to personal criticism. He'd learned that the day he'd joked lightly about her leaving a Chanel handbag on the kitchen counter beside an open pack of instant noodles. Still, the more he thought about it, the more his curiosity turned into an itch he had to scratch. He would start paying closer attention to her patterns, her reactions, her absences. He would find the missing piece to this puzzle. Little did he know, someone else had noticed too. The following evening, Adrian met up with two of his closest friends, Marcus and Lyle, at a dimly lit rooftop bar. The music was low, the city skyline glittered around them, and the air carried the scent of grilled seafood from the kitchen. "So?" Marcus asked, leaning forward with a grin. "How's it going with your billionaire princess?" Adrian smirked, sipping his whiskey. "She's different." "Different how?" Lyle pressed. Adrian hesitated, debating whether to share. "She's gorgeous, yeah. Everything you'd expect on the outside, but behind closed doors." He trailed off, shaking his head with a small, incredulous laugh. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me she's broke?" "Worse," Adrian muttered. "She's dirty. I mean, not just untidy. It's like she lives in a landfill." His friends exchanged looks, then burst out laughing. "So clean her up," Marcus said. "Hire a maid, for God's sake." "She won't let anyone touch her space," Adrian replied. "Trust me, I've tried suggesting it." For a moment, they were quiet, the city lights reflecting in their glasses. Lyle finally spoke. "So, you're leaving?" Adrian stared into his drink. He didn't answer. Not yet. 3 days later, Adrian got his answer in the most unexpected way. It was a Wednesday morning when the news broke. He was in his apartment halfway through a cup of coffee. Binta Dalton's father makes shocking marriage offer. Details inside. Curious, he clicked the link. The video opened to a press conference hall. Richard Dalton, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, dressed in an immaculate navy suit, stood at a podium. Microphones from every major news outlet crowded in front of him. "My daughter, Binta," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "is the light of my life. She is beautiful, intelligent, and accomplished. But as any father knows, time does not stand still. She is 45 now, and yet she remains unmarried. I will not hide that this troubles me deeply." There was a stir among the reporters, camera flashes popping like fireworks. Richard continued, "I have decided to make an offer, not because my daughter is not worthy on her own, but because perhaps the right man needs encouragement to see beyond what the world sees." He paused, letting the silence deepen. "To the man who marries my daughter, I will gift 50 million naira, a fully furnished home in Banana Island, and a luxury vehicle of his choice. This offer stands until the end of this year." The room erupted with questions. Adrian's heart pounded. He barely heard the rest of the conference. His mind was already racing. Banana Island, 50 million naira, a car worth more than his apartment building. Just days ago, he had been ready to walk away from Binta and her strange, repellent habits. But now he saw opportunity. A golden, glittering opportunity wrapped in silk and perfume. And he knew he could fake love. At least long enough to get what he wanted. That night, Adrian called Marcus and Lyle. "I'm staying," he said simply. "Staying? You just said—" Marcus started. "I'm staying," Adrian repeated, his voice firm. "For the money, the house, the car. After that—" He let the sentence hang. Lyle chuckled. "So you're really gonna play the long game?" Adrian smiled thinly. "Long enough to win?" Over the next few weeks, Adrian turned himself into the perfect suitor. He brought flowers, planned romantic dinners, showered Binta with compliments. He laughed at her jokes, listened to her stories, and pretended to be fascinated by her work with the Luxury Foundation. But behind the charm, his contempt grew. Whenever he returned to her penthouse, the same mess greeted him, and sometimes it was worse. One night, he stepped into the living room and froze. The air was heavy, not just with the smell of stale food, but something thicker. Something sour and metallic. He spotted it in the corner. A small pile of crumpled underwear, and beside it, several sanitary pads with dark, dried stains. His stomach churned. Binta didn't even notice his reaction. She walked past, humming softly, and disappeared into the kitchen. Later that evening, as they sat on the couch, Adrian caught her staring into space, her eyes unfocused, as if listening to something far away. "Binta?" he said gently. She blinked, returning to the present. You okay?" A small smile. "I'm fine." But something about the way she said it made his skin prickle. The next morning, as Adrian left for work, he passed an elderly woman in the hallway, a neighbor, her back slightly bent, her eyes sharp despite her years. She glanced at him, then at Binta's door, and muttered something under her breath. "What was that?" Adrian asked. The woman looked him up and down. "Be careful, young man. Beauty can hide many things." Before he could ask what she meant, she shuffled away. Adrian stood there for a moment, staring at Binta's door, unease crawling through him. He had come for money, for comfort, for status. But now he was starting to wonder if he'd stepped into something far darker than he'd bargained for. From the outside, Adrian's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. To Binta's father, he was the attentive gentleman who held her hand at public events, who arrived early to pick her up, who smiled warmly in every photo. To the press, he was the dashing, mysterious man who had captured the city's most glamorous prize, But behind closed doors, it was a performance, a carefully rehearsed act. Adrian began studying Binta like an investor studies a market. He learned her routines. She woke up late, often after 10 a.m., and went straight to scrolling through her phone in bed. Breakfast, if it happened, was usually cold pizza from the night before or leftover pastries from an event. She avoided certain corners of her home, particularly the large walk-in closet, where the smell was strongest. When she was in a good mood, she was intoxicating, playful, witty, generous. On such days, Adrian found it almost easy to forget the mess. But the mess always found him again. One evening, he returned from the kitchen with a glass of wine to find her sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by open designer shoeboxes and piles of worn clothes, some crumpled into damp heaps. She was humming softly, folding and unfolding the same silk scarf over and over. "What are you doing?" Adrian asked lightly, masking his disgust. "Looking for something," she murmured without looking up. "What?" Her hands paused mid-fold. For a moment, her gaze drifted into the distance, her eyes clouding over. Then she blinked, smiled, and said, "Never mind." Found it. But he didn't see anything in her hands. Later that night, as she slept beside him, Adrian lay awake, listening. In the stillness of the penthouse, he thought he heard a faint whisper. A woman's voice, low and deliberate, like someone speaking through a wall. He sat up, holding his breath. The sound faded. He told himself it was nothing, just the building settling. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. It was a Saturday afternoon when Adrian decided to take control. Binta had gone to a spa appointment and he saw his chance. He called a professional cleaning service, not just cleaners, but a specialist team who handled deep sanitation for luxury homes. When they arrived, he instructed them to start in the living room and work their way through. He left nothing untouched. Carpets shampooed, curtains replaced, air fresheners in every corner. The cleaners worked for 6 hours straight. By the time they were done, the penthouse looked like something out of an interior design magazine. The air smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. Adrian felt triumphant. When Binta returned, she froze in the doorway. Her eyes swept over the sparkling surfaces, the neatly arranged furniture, the absence of clutter. "You cleaned," she said flatly. "I wanted to do something nice for you," Adrian said, smiling. She stepped inside, her heels clicking on the now spotless floor. "You shouldn't have done that." "It's just cleaning," her voice sharpened. "I said you shouldn't have." Adrian stared at her, caught off guard by the sudden edge in her tone. But before he could respond, she softened, almost too quickly. "It's fine. Thank you." That night, he fell asleep feeling satisfied. But when he woke the next morning, his satisfaction evaporated. The living room was a mess again. Not completely, but enough to make his skin crawl. A trail of crumbs on the coffee table, 2 empty cups on the floor, a faint sour smell in the air. And in the corner, near the window, a single crumpled sanitary pad with a dark red stain, sitting as if it had been there for days. Adrian stared at it, his chest tightening. It was impossible. The cleaners had been thorough. He had locked the door when they left. Binta had been with him all night. And yet, the mess had returned. It was at a private cocktail party for the opening of a new luxury boutique when the first warning came. Adrian was standing with Binta, chatting with the boutique's owner, when he noticed a woman across the room staring at them. She was tall, elegant, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to pierce through the noise and light. The moment their eyes met, she walked over. "Binta," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's been a long time." Binta's smile faltered, just slightly, but Adrian caught it. "Clara," she replied, her voice even. Clara's gaze slid to Adrian. And you must be the new man." "That's right," Adrian said, shaking her hand. Her grip was cool, firm. Clara's eyes lingered on him for a moment too long. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "Be careful, she's not what you think." Before he could ask what she meant, she straightened, gave Binta a final polite smile, and drifted away into the crowd. Later, as they drove home, Adrian asked, "Who was that?" "An old friend," Binta said shortly. "You don't seem close." Her jaw tightened. "We're not." Adrian didn't press further, but Clara's words echoed in his mind. "Not what you think." The weeks following the boutique party were a whirlwind of appearances. Binta seemed to have a social calendar that never stopped. At each event, she was luminous, the embodiment of sophistication. Her laughter was soft and warm, her posture flawless, her presence magnetic. Adrian, always at her side, became a fixture in her world. Cameras now captured him as much as they did her. He learned to smile in the exact way that made him look both charming and deeply in love. To the public, they were a perfect match, the envy of the city. But every time they returned home, the perfect image shattered. A shoe left in the hallway, a glass abandoned on the windowsill. But then it became impossible to ignore. Dishes piled up overnight. The bathroom mirror developed streaks of grime. The scent, that same faint, unpleasant undertone, clung to the air no matter how much Adrian tried to mask it with scented candles. One night, after an especially glittering gala, they came home to find the front door slightly ajar. Adrian froze. "Did you leave it open?" Binta glanced at the door without concern. "Probably. I was in a rush." Inside, nothing seemed stolen, but in the living room, Adrian noticed something odd. The air felt heavier, almost damp. In the corner by the sofa, a pile of crumpled underwear lay in a heap, and on top of it, a long silk scarf. It was the same scarf Binta had been folding and unfolding weeks ago. When he pointed it out, she shrugged. "It's just a scarf, Adrian." But he could see the faintest flicker in her eyes, a shadow that disappeared as quickly as it came. It was an unseasonably cool evening when Adrian saw Clara again. He had gone to the Lux Horizon bar to meet a client for drinks, but the client canceled at the last minute. Deciding to stay for a nightcap, he took a seat by the window, the city lights shimmering below. And then, there she was, Clara. She was alone, seated at the far end of the bar, a glass of red wine in her hand. Her gaze met his, and she smiled, not warmly, but knowingly. He hesitated, then walked over. "Clara," he greeted. "Adrian," she said smoothly, gesturing to the empty seat beside her. "Join me." For a while, they made small talk. Clara asked about his work, his family, his life before Binta, but then her voice dropped just slightly. "How long have you been with her?" "Almost 6 months," he said cautiously. Clara's eyes held his. "And you've noticed things?" Adrian's fingers tightened around his glass. "What things?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she leaned closer. "Be careful, Adrian. Some habits are not just habits." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She swirled her wine slowly, watching the deep red liquid. "Ask her about the night she turned 25. Before he could respond, she set down her glass, stood, and walked out into the night, leaving him with more questions than answers. That night, as he lay beside Binta, he found himself watching her in the dim light. Her breathing was slow and steady, but her brow was furrowed, as if she were dreaming something unpleasant. He almost reached out to wake her, but then she whispered something in her sleep. It wasn't a word he recognized. It sounded old, foreign, heavy with meaning, and for the first time since meeting her, a chill ran down his spine. The following weekend, Richard Dalton invited Adrian to his private office. The room was lined with bookshelves, the air scented faintly of leather and wood polish. I wanted to speak to you man to man, Richard began, his eyes steady. You know about my offer. Yes, sir, Adrian replied. Richard leaned back. Many men have tried to pursue my daughter over the years. All failed. Some left because they couldn't handle her ways. Others because they were not in it for the right reasons. Adrian kept his expression neutral. I care for her. Do you? Richard's tone sharpened, though his voice remained calm. Because if you don't, she'll know. She always knows. They spoke for nearly an hour, and by the end, Richard laid out the terms. The $50 million, the Banana Island house, and the luxury car would be his, but only if he stayed married to Binta for at least 2 years. If he left before then, he would forfeit everything. Adrian accepted without hesitation. 2 years. He could endure 2 years. That night, when he returned to the penthouse, Binta was in the bedroom, sitting on the floor amid a fresh chaos of clothes, papers, and unopened packages. She looked up at him with a smile. You talked to my father today, she said, as if she'd been there in the room. Adrian froze. How did you? She tilted her head. I know things, Adrian. Things I don't always say. Her tone was light, almost playful, but there was something in her eyes, something that made him feel as though he were standing at the edge of a deep, deep pool, unable to see the bottom. He smiled tightly, walking over to kiss her cheek. But inside, his thoughts churned. Clara's words, the mess that returned no matter what, the whispers in the dark. They were all pieces of a puzzle he was no longer sure he wanted to solve. It was just past midnight when Adrian returned from a late dinner with some business associates. The penthouse was dark, save for the faint glow of the city lights seeping through the glass walls. Binta, he called, stepping inside. No answer. The air felt different, heavier, as though the rooms were holding their breath. He set down his jacket and walked toward the bedroom, but halfway there, he froze. The living room was wrong. Furniture that had been neatly arranged earlier was now crooked. The coffee table had fresh stains, and the faint sour smell was back, stronger than ever. But what made his skin crawl was the pile of objects in the center of the floor. It was as if someone had deliberately gathered them there. Binta's silk scarf, several crumpled undergarments, 2 used pads with dark red stains, and a small framed photo of a younger Binta smiling beside a girl Adrian didn't recognize. As he bent down to look closer, a whisper brushed past his ear, so close, so sudden, he nearly jumped. Leave before it takes you too. He spun around. No one. Moments later, Binta appeared in the doorway. Her hair was loose, her silk robe tied carelessly. You're home late, she said softly. Who's this? Adrian asked, holding up the photo. Binta glanced at it briefly. Someone I used to know. Her tone made it clear she would say no more. She crossed the room, picked up the scarf from the pile, and walked away as though the mess didn't exist. Adrian stared after her, the whisper still echoing in his mind. The next day, Adrian arranged to meet Clara at a quiet cafe away from the city center. He didn't tell Binta. Clara arrived in a fitted cream coat, her hair pinned neatly back. She sat opposite him, studying him with those unblinking eyes. You saw something, she said. Adrian hesitated. I saw enough to know something's not normal. Clara leaned forward, her voice low. Do you know what happens when someone loves the wrong person too much? When they put that person above their own life, their own self-worth? Adrian frowned. What are you talking about? Her gaze drifted briefly to the window. I loved someone once, a long time ago. She was my best friend, my sister in everything but blood. And then, she took something from me, something I couldn't get back. Binta, Adrian said quietly. Clara's lips curved into a humorless smile. She didn't mean to, but it didn't matter. I went to someone, a woman who could make sure no man would ever truly want her. that no matter how beautiful she looked, she would always repel them in ways they couldn't explain. It was a curse. And it worked. Adrian's pulse quickened. You cursed her? Clara nodded once. It was supposed to be for life. But curses have a way of spilling over. You've been in that house long enough. Tell me, have you noticed it yet? The way it feels heavier every week? Adrian thought of the whisper, the overnight mess, the sour smell that clung no matter what. Clara's eyes sharpened. Leave, Adrian. Before it takes you too. He leaned back, heart thudding. Takes me? She didn't answer. She simply stood, adjusted her coat and walked away. That evening, Binta's father invited Adrian for dinner at his estate. The house was enormous, its gardens stretching into the horizon, lit with soft golden lamps. Over roasted lamb and vintage wine, Richard spoke warmly about the wedding plans. Everything will be ready by June, he said. I want the world to see my daughter as she deserves to be seen. Adrian smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. Clara's words played over and over in his head. After dinner, as Richard stepped away to take a call, Adrian wandered through the house. He stopped before a large family portrait, Binta at about 25, standing beside her parents. And there, in the background, half in shadow, was Clara. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, they were locked on Binta. A chill ran down Adrian's spine. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Binta seemed unusually quiet. As they prepared for bed, she suddenly asked, "Do you believe in unfinished business?" Adrian glanced at her. "What do you mean?" She lay back on the pillows, staring at the ceiling. "Sometimes I feel like someone's still here. Someone I can't see. Watching." Her voice was calm, but her eyes glistened in the low light. Before Adrian could respond, the bedroom lamp flickered twice, and then went out. The room plunged into darkness, and from the far corner came a faint, deliberate sound. Fold, unfold, fold, unfold, like silk being handled in the dark. The wedding was a spectacle. Held in the glass-domed ballroom of the Dalton Grand Hotel, it was attended by politicians, business moguls, celebrities, and the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers rained light down on arrangements of white orchids and roses that perfumed the air. A string quartet played softly as guests took their seats. Binta was breathtaking. Her gown, an off-shoulder masterpiece, was embroidered with thousands of crystals that shimmered with every step. Her hair was swept into a sleek chignon, and her diamond necklace caught the light like a star. To the world, she was perfection. To Adrian, she was a fortune in human form. When Richard Dalton stood to speak after the vows, the entire room fell silent. His voice was firm, carrying the weight of his name and fortune. "Today, I welcome a son," he began, turning to Adrian. "And as promised, I honor my word. To you, I give 50 million naira, a fully furnished mansion in Banana Island, and the keys to a brand new luxury car." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the guests. A steward brought forward a ceremonial case holding documents and keys, which Adrian accepted with a smile that barely hid his triumph. Inside, his thoughts were already racing. 2 years? I won't even need 2 months. I have the money, the house, the car. Now I can be free. That night, as the reception wound down, Adrian stepped outside to make a call to Marcus. "It's done," he whispered. "I've got everything. I'm not sticking around." Marcus laughed on the other end. "Enjoy the honeymoon, man. You've won." Adrian didn't notice Binta standing just beyond the shadows, her expression unreadable. 2 weeks later, Adrian decided it was time. He had moved into the Banana Island mansion, transferred part of the cash to a private account overseas, and was preparing to disappear. His plan was simple: tell Binta he needed to travel for business and never return. That morning, he entered the penthouse for the last time. The place was dimly lit, the curtains drawn. Binta was seated on the floor in the living room, surrounded by the familiar mess: clothes, wrappers, crumpled pads, and that ever-present silk scarf. "I'm leaving today," Adrian said flatly. "Business trip. Won't be back for a while." Binta's hand stilled. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to his. "You were never here for me, were you?" He didn't answer. She gave a small, bitter smile. "I've always known, Adrian. The moment you stepped into my life, I saw it in your eyes. You were here for what my father promised. Nothing more." He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise." Her smile faded. "Then at least stay long enough to hear the truth. About me. About why I live the way I do." "I'm not interested," he said, turning toward the door. But before he could reach it, the lights flickered. A cold gust swept through the room, though the windows were shut. From the corner came that familiar whisper, only louder now, urgent. "It's time." Adrian froze. Binta rose to her feet, picked up the scarf, and walked to the center of the room. Her voice was calm, almost ceremonial. "On my 25th birthday, someone I loved, my best friend, cursed me. She made sure that no man would ever stay, that my beauty would draw them in, but my filth would drive them out. I could clean 100 times and wake up to a mess. The curse lived here," she tapped her temple. "And here," she touched her heart. Adrian swallowed, uneasy. So, Binta's eyes glinted. "Clara came to me last night." The name struck him like ice. "She confessed, she broke the curse, and when she did, she asked me to promise her one thing, that I would never again let anyone stay in my life just to use me." As she spoke, Adrian realized something was changing. The air felt lighter. The sour smell was gone. He looked around. The piles of clothes were vanishing, the stains dissolving as if erased by invisible hands. The penthouse was transforming before his eyes into a spotless, radiant space. And then, he heard the footsteps. Richard Dalton stepped into the room, flanked by 2 suited men. "Adrian," he said coldly, "you're leaving, are you?" Adrian's heart sank. "We've been watching you," Richard continued. "Every call, every transfer, every word you've said behind my daughter's back, the money, the house, the car, they were conditional. Break your vows, and they return to me." One of the suited men handed Richard a file. "Everything is here," Richard said. "Your little escape plan. I'm giving you 2 options. Walk away now with nothing, or face charges for fraud." Adrian's mouth went dry. "You can't." "I can," Richard cut in, "and I will." Binta stood beside her father now, her gown immaculate, her presence regal. The woman before him was no longer the one he had mocked to his friends. She was whole, free, and untouchable. Adrian looked from one to the other, realizing the game was over. Without another word, he walked out, the door closing behind him with a finality that felt like a verdict. Months later, Binta was seen at a charity gala, glowing, elegant, and with a quiet smile that spoke of freedom. She had taken back her life, her dignity, and her space. As for Adrian, he was last heard of trying to sell fake luxury watches in a backstreet market. The memory of the Banana Island mansion haunting him like a ghost of the fortune that slipped through his fingers. And the story lived on, whispered in the city's corners as a warning. He married her for her father's money. But he never expected what came next. Moral of the story: true wealth is not measured by money or possessions, but by the purity of your intentions and the value of your character. Greed blinds, deceit destroys, and those who exploit others for gain will always meet their downfall. Love built on lies will crumble, but a heart that stays true will rise above betrayal and shine even brighter after the storm. And that, beautiful family, is where our story ends. But the lesson will echo forever. Adrian thought he had played the game, but the game played him. He chased wealth, only to lose it all, while Binta broke free from a curse, reclaimed her dignity, and stepped into a future brighter than ever. Life has a way of revealing true intentions, and when it does, the tables turn faster than you can imagine. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Binta's shoes? Walk away quietly or set the perfect trap? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't just click away. Stay with us for more mind-blowing, heart-gripping tales every week. And remember, sometimes the richest lessons come from the most unexpected places. Until next time, keep your heart pure, your eyes open, and your soul unshakable.